April 20th. The day I turned 25, we were halfway through dinner when Grandpa leaned back, smiled, and asked, "Is the apartment comfortable?" That sentence cracked my entire world open. By April 23rd, I would learn that my parents had drained more than $670,000 from my trust fund. They forged my signature 36 times. They used my name, my future, and my silence. I'm Nick Aldridge, 25 years old, and they thought I would never notice. If you've ever felt blindsided by your own family's greed, leave your city name in the comments below. And subscribe, because what happened next rewrote everything I thought I knew about blood, money, and betrayal. Let's back up to the dining table. Everything about the night felt slightly off. Like walking into a play already mid-scene. The plates were heavy ceramic. The kind you rent for weddings. Not the kind we ever owned. The flower vase had a sticker half peeled off. My mom flitted between the table and kitchen like a stage director, forcing smiles and fussing over napkins. "Isn't this wonderful? Nick, all your favorite people." Her voice was tight, rehearsed. Dad stood behind his chair with both hands gripping the backrest like it might float away. His face was gray. Not nervous gray, concrete gray. Amelia, my younger sister, scrolled her phone like she didn't want to be here either. At the end of the table sat a man I didn't recognize. Mid-30s. Slick suit. Water glass untouched. And then Grandpa said it again. Slower this time. "Is the apartment comfortable?" He blinked. "What apartment?" Mom let out a nervous laugh that shattered like glass. "Oh. You know how he gets confused sometimes." "Right. Dad." She was trying to disarm the question, but Grandpa wasn't confused. He was patient. He always has been the kind of man who built a fortune by knowing when to let silence work harder than words. "I sent $275,000 8 months ago," he said flatly. "For Nick's apartment at Harborview Towers, prepaid rent, furniture allowance, security deposit. I wanted him settled before the trust fund vested." The room went silent. Amelia looked up. "What trust fund?" My heart pounded. "Yeah, what trust fund?" The man by the kitchen, still silent, raised an eyebrow. Like he was watching a chess match someone had just lost in one move. Mom's voice climbed an octave. "Let's not do this now. It's Nick's birthday." But Grandpa's voice was level. "Where's the apartment key?" "Diane?" Dad opened his mouth but couldn't find the words. His hands were trembling. "We were going to tell him," he said finally. We thought." "You thought what?" Grandpa interrupted. "That he didn't need to know his own money existed." The table was covered in contradictions, a store-bought cake next to catered hors d'oeuvres, dollar store balloons tied to chairs from someone else's dining room. It hit me like a punch. This whole party was staged. A performance. I was just the excuse. "Grab your jacket," Grandpa said to me. "Dad. Please." Mom pleaded. "Let's talk about this like adults. We could have talked 8 months ago. Or 6. Or last week." Grandpa replied, "You made your choice." I looked around one last time, the fake smiles. The rented plates. My sister frozen mid-swipe. The stranger in the suit still watching. Then I got up. "Nick? Please?" Mom's voice cracked. I turned. "This isn't my party. It's yours." I was just the prop. The front door closed behind us, like the curtain falling on a play no one wanted to watch. Outside, Grandpa's Camry sat next to a black SUV I didn't recognize. The kind that says, "I'm borrowing power I didn't earn." "Get in," Grandpa said. "We need to talk." The car smelled like leather polish and old coffee. He drove like he did everything steady. Deliberate. No wasted motion. We merged onto the highway without him asking where I wanted to go. "That man at the party?" I said finally. "The one near the kitchen. Riley Kane." Grandpa replied. "Used to investigate financial crimes for the IRS. Now he works for me." That was the moment I realized something deeper had already begun. Grandpa hadn't just asked a question. He'd launched a war. We pulled into the underground garage of Harborview Towers just before 8 I'd driven past this place before, usually on my way to install security systems in other people's apartments. I never imagined I'd step foot inside one, much less be told it had been mine for nearly a year. Grandpa reached into the glove box and handed me a key fob, already programmed with your name. He said, Unit 3204. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor was silent, except for the soft ding of each number lighting up. My reflection in the mirrored wall didn't look like someone with a trust fund. I looked like a guy who couldn't afford to replace his broken microwave. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway lined with plush carpet and gold-plated unit numbers. We stopped at 3204. The fob clicked green. The door swung open, and I froze. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the Mississippi River. The skyline glittered like circuitry neat, controlled. Untouchable. Inside, the apartment was perfect. Modern furniture, clean lines, warm lighting. It looked like something out of an architecture magazine, but it didn't feel lived in. Silverware still wrapped in packaging, warranty cards filed by purchase date, a gym membership envelope on the counter, postmarked 8 months ago. I walked into the bedroom. The sheets were hotel crisp, the closet hangers evenly spaced. In the bathroom, the mirror was spotless, toothbrush holder empty. It was like walking into a stage set built for me, a life curated by someone else, waiting for a version of me who never arrived. Everything you'd need. Grandpa said from the living room, rents paid for 2 years. Furniture allowance. Security deposits. I wanted you set up before your trust fund came through. I turned to him slowly. Trust fund. The words felt foreign in my mouth. He nodded. $760,000. It was supposed to vest on your 25th birthday. 3 weeks ago. I ran the numbers in my head. And it's not there. His face tightened. Someone's been borrowing against it for years. He said quietly, your parents had banking connections, found loopholes. They forged requests, took out early distributions using your name. My stomach twisted. How much is left? Maybe 30,000? If we're lucky. I laughed. But there was no humor in it. I opened the fridge empty, except for a welcome basket cheese, crackers, a bottle of sparkling water that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. I couldn't feel anger yet. Just cold clarity. They stole from me. I said, they stole your future. Grandpa corrected. But they were sloppy. He walked to the windows, hands clasped behind his back, like a general surveying a battlefield. Riley's been following the trail for 6 months. He noticed the pattern before I did. Credit reports, transaction anomalies, withdrawals with forged authorization. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. I needed more than suspicion. He said, I needed proof. That night, I lay on the untouched mattress in the apartment I never knew existed. I stared at the ceiling, counting the lies I'd been fed, the years I'd been denied, and the people who thought I'd never question anything. And I made a decision. They wanted quiet. I'd give them quiet. But not the kind they expected. Not silence. Strategy. Riley Kane showed up at 9 the next morning, carrying coffee in one hand and a briefcase in the other. He moved through the apartment like an investigator at a crime scene, methodical, unhurried, quietly noting details. No one else would have noticed. Your grandfather gave me the overview, he said, setting up his laptop on the dining table. But we need to dig deeper. If we want this to hold up in court, every dollar has to have a timestamp. Every lie has to have a receipt. He spoke in a tone I'd heard on courtroom. Television dramas, only more clinical, more real. Grandpa arrived 20 minutes later with pastries that looked like they'd come from a place that didn't take credit cards. He took a seat by the windows and let Riley run the meeting. Riley pulled up a spreadsheet columns of numbers, transaction codes, bank names, and initials. Your trust was set up with Northfield Corporate Trust. $760,000. It was supposed to vest on your 25th birthday. Automatic disbursement. No action required on your part. He paused. except someone did take action. 3 years ago, he showed me scanned copies of forged correspondence letters requesting early distributions. Signed with my name, but in handwriting that wasn't mine. Some were even faxed. Who still uses a fax machine in this decade? Call logs match the requests. Riley continued. They provided callback numbers. The trust company never verified using your registered contact. That's a serious compliance failure on their end. He zoomed into one document, an early distribution request from 18 months ago. Signed Nick Aldridge. I stared at it for a long time. They copied your signature from DMV records. Riley said. We found their printer logs. Your dad downloaded scanned copies from your old driver's license renewal file. My hands clenched without me realizing. Grandpa said nothing. But his jaw was tight. How much did they take, I asked. Approximately $640,000 so far. Riley said. Another $33,000 was hidden as administrative fees. Vendor credits. Small transfers. They used everything. What did they spend it on? My voice was calm. Too calm. Riley clicked to a new tab. Furniture stores. Home renovations. Credit card balances. Spa packages. A $15,000 donation to the private school Amelia never even attended. Your dad used the trust to buy a hot tub. A stone patio. Kitchen appliances. None of it had anything to do with your future. I sat back. It wasn't just theft. It was entitlement. It was rewriting my life and calling it theirs. Can we get it back, I asked. Riley nodded. If we move fast. Identity theft reports. Credit freezes. Civil litigation. And if you choose criminal charges, Grandpa cut in. You don't have to decide that today. I looked at both of them. Riley, with his folders full of facts. Grandpa, with his silence full of history. I want them to feel every step, I said, but not loud. Not messy. Riley smiled faintly. Quiet revenge. I like it. We spent the next 4 hours filing reports. I submitted the affidavit to the Federal Trade Commission. Froze my credit at all 3 bureaus. Called banks. Set up fraud alerts. Filed a police report with the Minneapolis PD, where a detective who sounded like he'd seen this 100 times took down every detail. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Amelia. Mom's crying. Dad won't come out of the bedroom. What's happening? I stared at the screen. Then I locked it. I wasn't ready for her yet. Riley was already making more calls. Speaking in code switch shorthand to bankers and attorneys. Calling in favors. Pulling strings. He wasn't just documenting what had been done. He was building a trap they couldn't escape. They left fingerprints all over the fraud. He said. Digital. Financial. Emotional. He paused. Your parents didn't just make a mistake. They built a lifestyle on stolen money. From their own son. I said nothing. But in that moment, something changed. I wasn't their son anymore. I was their creditor. And I had receipts. Before o'clock, the apartment looked less like a place to live and more like a command center. Bank statements stacked in labeled folders. Screenshots of transaction logs pinned in Riley's spreadsheet. My kitchen counter had become a timeline of betrayal. $15 spa charges. $7,000 furniture payments. $42 coffee machines. Each item represented a brick in the wall they'd built between us. Riley tapped his keyboard with surgeon precision. 3 years of activity. He said, we're building a ledger. Every forged signature. Every unauthorized withdrawal. Every purchase tied to stolen funds. I leaned over and saw it highlighted entries. Cross-referenced emails. Merchant category codes. One transaction stood out. $37,000 to Bergen's Fine Furniture, I asked. Right. Riley replied. Same week, your mom posted Instagram photos of her new dining room set. You'll love this next part. Caption said, hard work pays off. Ender. I let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. They used money meant for my future to buy likes. Another cluster appeared $22,000 across 6 months to a cosmetic medical spa. Skin treatments. Injectables. And packages labeled rejuvenation bundles. Another, a landscaping retainer for nearly 10,000. A private school tuition payment for a student that never attended. They created a company, Riley said, almost as an afterthought. A shell LLC called Aldridge Lifestyle Services. Registered in Delaware. Your father is listed as managing member. They used it to funnel large purchases through a business account. E blinked. A fake company. Technically it exists. But it doesn't do anything except launder your money into things they wanted. Appliances. Vacation rentals. Business class flights. He showed me more fake email addresses, all variants of my dad's. Logins from his home IP address. Device fingerprints from his phone accessing the trust portal during his lunch breaks from electrical job sites. They weren't even careful. Riley said. This is amateur hour. It wasn't even the sloppiness that stunned me. It was the sheer confidence. They never thought they'd be caught. They never thought I'd be curious enough to ask. By evening, Riley had built a case strong enough to prosecute in multiple jurisdictions. Wire fraud, identity theft, Bankfraud, conspiracy, abuse of fiduciary access. He zipped the files onto a flash drive and handed it to me like a loaded weapon. Marlo will want to see every detail, he said. He's old school paper exhibits. Signed affidavits. Sequential folders. But once he's in, he's a sledgehammer. My eyes flicked across the documents. It was all there. They had stolen my money. Lied to my face. Staged a party on top of their deception. And now every click, every call, every cent, they'd all become evidence. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Amelia. Can you please just call Mom? She says there's been a misunderstanding. I took a screenshot, then added it to the evidence folder. The truth didn't need to shout. It just needed to be organized. At 9:30 the next morning, I stood in the lobby of Marlowe and Jennings LLP, clutching the folder that held my parents' financial autopsy. The building itself was unimpressive, built sometime in the 80s, with marble floors that had long since lost their shine. But the man inside was anything but. James Marlowe looked like every courtroom drama's idea of a corporate attorney. Steel-framed glasses. Tailored gray suit. Handshake firm enough to close a merger. He barely glanced at Riley or me before opening the folder and diving into the evidence. For 15 minutes, he said nothing. Just flipped pages. Underlined entries. Jotted notes in block capitals. Wire fraud. He said finally, without looking up. Identity theft. Conversion of trust assets. He turned a page. Your parents weren't even subtle. His tone was clinical. Not surprised. Just disappointed in the amateurism. We'll file a temporary restraining order immediately. Lock down every account linked to the stolen funds. Prejudgment. Writ of attachment to freeze high-risk assets. We'll subpoena financial records. Depose them under oath. If they've got anything left, we'll find it. I nodded. And criminal charges? Marlowe looked at Riley. We'll get to that. Right now, our goal is simple. Stop the bleeding. Secure what's left. For the next hour, I sat through what felt like the corporate version of battlefield triage. Riley and Marlowe coordinated like they'd done this dozens of times. Riley reading digital footprints. Marlowe translating them into legal maneuvers. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a plaintiff. Marlowe turned to me. The judge won't want emotion. She'll want dates. Numbers. Facts. When they ask about your parents, you keep it simple. I'm not close to them. I said. Good. They'll ask when you learned about the trust. 3 days ago. Did you authorize any early withdrawals? No. I never spoke to Northfield Trust. I didn't even know they existed. He nodded. You'll do fine. While his paralegal filed motions electronically, I spent the next hour locking everything down, changing every password, adding two-factor authentication, setting fraud alerts, rerouting mail to Harborview, locking my SIM card. By lunch, the legal fuse was lit. Marlowe's team would begin their work. Subpoenas, account audits, forensic review. But mine was simpler. Stay calm. Answer honestly. Let the numbers burn the house they built. Grandpa joined us for a final review. He signed paperwork with the quiet efficiency of a man who once approved million-dollar transactions between sips of coffee. We do this clean, he said. No drama. No headlines. Just law doing its job. By 3 o'clock, we had our court hearing scheduled. Judge Pamela. Hennepin County District Court. Commercial Division. Known for being skeptical about family financial drama, but laser precise when shown clean numbers. She doesn't care about sob stories. Marlowe warned. She cares about spreadsheets. That night, I walked to the grocery store and bought dinner. Chicken. Rice. Real vegetables. The kind of food you cook when you realize no one else is going to take care of you. I stood at the apartment window and watched the city flicker to life. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably panicking. Their phones lighting up with declined transactions, their lawyer flipping through folders of denials and bad advice. And me, I was just getting started. The courthouse smelled like old floor wax and fluorescent lighting. You could almost hear the decades of whispered regret and courtroom confessions clinging to the marble walls. My shoes echoed down the hallway click. 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 Like every step was carrying the weight of 3 stolen years. Riley walked beside me, composed as ever, briefcase in one hand, the other tucked in his coat pocket, like he didn't have a care in the world. Marlowe was already ahead of us, stone-faced, holding the folder that would either secure my restitution or tear my family's reputation into legal confetti. Inside the courtroom, my parents sat at the respondents' table. I almost didn't recognize them. Dad looked older, like the lies had been aging him in real time. His hands fidgeted constantly, fingers tapping on the table. Mom, she was thinner. Her once polished appearance dulled. The salon highlights were gone. And in their place, silvery roots peeked through. She kept dabbing her eyes with tissues, more for effect than for necessity. And behind them sat Amelia. Her face a mask of uncertainty. She avoided eye contact, stared at the back wall like if she looked at me, she'd unravel. Then the door behind the bench opened. All rise. Judge Pamela entered with the kind of presence that silenced air itself. Early 40s. Short hair. Piercing eyes. And a reputation for precision. She sat, adjusted her robe, and said calmly, "Let's begin." Marlowe stepped forward with the confidence of a man who had been preparing for this moment his entire career. "Your Honor," he began, "this case concerns systematic identity theft and conversion of assets from a registered trust fund over a period of 36 months. The respondent parents Mark and Diane Aldridge accessed the plaintiff's trust using falsified correspondence, unauthorized callback numbers, and forged documents." He opened the folder and began distributing the exhibits, Exhibit A through R bank records, digital access logs, forged signatures, merchant recette, and IP addresses linked to devices in the respondent's home. Judge Pamela didn't blink. "Walk me through the timeline." Marlowe did. Each forged distribution, each timestamp, each purchase. I watched as he painted a picture not with emotion, but with numbers cold, precise, irrefutable. She turned to me. "Mr. Aldridge," she said, "please approach the stand." My heartbeat was steady. I'd practiced this. "Did you authorize any early distributions from your trust fund?" "No." "Did you have any communication with Northfield Trust prior to your 25th birthday?" "No." "Were you aware that your trust was being accessed for 3 years?" "No." She nodded. "Thank you." Then came the cross-examination. Their attorney, some woman who looked like she specialized in corporate disaster control, tried a softer approach. She emphasized family, misunderstandings, financial stress. "Isn't it possible your parents were trying to help to guide you?" I looked directly at her. "They forged my name 36 times. But you never explicitly told them not to." "I didn't know the account existed. How could I forbid something I never knew about?" Marlowe returned for redirect and dropped the hammer. Device fingerprints from the father's work phone. Trust portal logins during his lunch breaks. Credit card statements showing purchases made within 48 hours of each forged withdrawal. He pulled up an exhibit, Instagram posts, dining set purchased from Bergen's like stacked Datamans, captioned earned, not gifted, paid for with stolen money. Judge Pamela requested a 15-minute recess to review the evidence. I stepped outside the courtroom and sat on a bench. My hands shook slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of watching your own parents unravel under oath. 15 minutes later, the gavel echoed. Temporary restraining order granted. Judge Pamela declared, effective immediately. The respondents are prohibited from accessing, transferring, or disposing of any asset directly or indirectly linked to the plaintiff's trust distributions. She continued, each word a verdict in itself. Asset freeze. Court-ordered forensic audit. Prejudgment. Writ of attachment on primary bank accounts. Complete discovery of 3 years of financial records. Final hearing scheduled in 6 weeks. She looked at both sides. This court will rule on financial facts, not emotional appeals. Gavel down. Case moved forward. Behind me, I could hear Mom quietly sobbing. Dad didn't move. Amelia, for the first time, looked at me. Her eyes weren't full of hatred or blame, just something sadder. Resignation. And maybe regret. In the days following the temporary restraining order, my parents' world unraveled faster than I ever imagined. It started with a text from Riley. Your parents' primary checking account is frozen. Decline transactions all day. I could almost hear their panic through his words. That evening, as I returned to Harborview Towers, I watched Dad's work van slow to a halt at the gas station down the block. When his credit card was declined, the pump clicked off mid-fill. He stood there, hand on hip, staring at the nozzle like it had betrayed him. Later that night, I learned the electrical contracting company dropped him from their preferred vendor list. They said his background check flagged a financial judgment. Word got around fast. Social media whispers. Neighborhood group chats. Even Mrs. Carver next door stopped waving. Mom, who used to post selfies on Sunday brunch stories, went silent. No more latte art photos. No more cocktails at the country club. Instead, she was seen at the front desk of their once-beloved golf course, trying to negotiate a new payment plan for her membership fees. By the end of the week, they'd closed their high-interest credit cards. The hot tub services got canceled. The ski condo reservation vanished. I watched from a distance as their home began its own transformation. Auction listings for plasma televisions purchased with my money. Notices of lien on the patio remodel. Foreclosure warnings on the home equity line of credit. At the same time, my own world shifted. Locked doors that once symbolized betrayal now felt like fortifications. Each night, I locked the deadbolt, walked to the balcony, and reminded myself that this peace was bought with accountability. Through it all, I never raised my voice. I never posted a vindictive update. Instead, I channeled my energy into the Unlocked Project, a nonprofit Riley and I quietly launched. We helped a retired sergeant whose cousin had siphoned his GI Bill payments. We assisted a college student whose aunt had forged scholarship forms. Each case felt like an echo of my own, but with different faces. I organized pro bono clinics at the legal aid office downtown. I sat with veterans in strip mall conference rooms, patiently walking them through identity theft affidavits and credit freezes. Back in my apartment, the evidence folders remained on the dining table, bound for the final hearing in 6 weeks. But the real work was happening outside courtrooms and calls to school administrators, emails to financial institutions, late-night strategy sessions with Riley over black coffee and stale pastries. One morning, I spotted Amelia in the lobby. She lingered by the security desk, glanced at me, then hurried away. A few days later, she sent a text. I saw you helping Miss Franklin at the shelter. Proud of you. No apology. No explanation. But enough. By the end of the month, the audit was complete. The forensic accountants delivered their report. $673,000 plus, interest and legal fees to be paid through structured settlement, sale of assets, and garnished wages. The judge signed the restitution order without fanfare. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled, as if I'd been holding my breath for years. My parents began making the payments. Automatic debits drained their accounts on schedule. They showed up at the collection office with envelopes of cash, face to face with the price of their choices. The neighborhood gossip shifted tone. Sympathy replaced judgment. But by then, I'd learned that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. It requires distance. Now, each time I step into the elevator at Harborview, I see the polished floors, the silent security cameras, and I think every reflection, every smile, is mine. They stole my future, but they rebuilt it for me, and I used their own money to do it. Autumn had painted Minneapolis in shades of gold and crimson by the time I received the envelope that changed everything again. It slipped beneath my apartment door thin, unmarked, bearing only my name in neat cursive. Inside were documents. I thought I had long since lost my original birth certificate, the social security card I had never seen in person, my high school diploma still crisp, the vaccination records filed away during childhood. No nachi, no apology, just the proof of who I was before any of the theft. Before the trust fund, before the betrayal. I stared at the papers on my kitchen counter. The white surface illuminated by the soft glow of the pendant lights. The apartment felt different now, no longer just a fortress, but a home built on truth. I knew immediately who sent them. Amelia, the sister who had been caught in the middle, the one I had both shielded and excluded. She had taken these from my childhood bedroom during one of her visits home, packed them carefully, and entrusted them to building security to deliver to me here. The gesture was more powerful than any apology. It was recognition that our shared history, our real shared history, still mattered, even if our parents had tried to rewrite it with stolen money. I folded the papers and placed them in a drawer next to my investment statements and identity theft affidavits, documents that represented the lives of two very different Nicks, one stolen from, one restored. That week, I met Vanessa, the sergeant I had helped through the Unlocked project, at the downtown legal aid office. She handed me a framed letter of thanks from the veterans organization she now coordinated. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "You gave me my life back," she said. And I realized then that the quiet revenge I sought had become something greater justice, not just for me, but for others. Meanwhile, my parents were fulfilling the structured settlement schedule. Every month, a sum deducted directly from their bank account, applied to restitution. They had sold the country club membership. The landscaping company removed the patio stones. The spa credits vanished into the court's escrow. I heard through the grapevine that Dad had taken a job at a smaller contractor and Mom was volunteering at a retirement home. They'd lost more than money. They'd lost the social currency that once defined them. One evening, while preparing dinner, roasted vegetables and grilled salmon, the kind of meal I actually cooked, now I received a late-night call from Riley. He had news. Detective Kramer from Minneapolis PD wants to discuss federal charges. He paused, as if to let the weight of the words sink in. Wire fraud, identity theft, both are federal felonies. They're building the case as we speak. I thanked him, feeling neither triumph nor fear. This was simply the next logical step in the process. And I trusted Riley and Grandpa to handle it with the same precision they had shown from day one. That weekend, I went on a jog along the riverfront trail where my childhood dog used to chase sticks. The crisp air filled my lungs, and I thought of the countless times I had paused here, asking myself if I would ever break free from the suffocating lies at home. Now, each step felt like reclaiming a piece of my past, one stride closer to a future, defined by my own terms. In the months that followed, I continued balancing contract IT work with unlocked project cases. I shared office space with Riley on Tuesday evenings, poring over new evidence, mentoring a young accountant who had uncovered her parents' unauthorized withdrawals, and drafting pro bono affidavits for students whose scholarships were hijacked. My story became both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. On Christmas Eve, I found myself standing in the lobby as my parents arrived, hands empty, faces anxious. But I stayed on the balcony, watching them from above. arms crossed against the winter chill. They looked up, spotted me, and called my name. I didn't move. Instead, I whispered to myself, "Is the apartment comfortable?" And in the silence that followed, I answered just for me, "It is now." Winter thawed into spring, and with it came the next chapter of this quiet war. I was in my home office, 3 computer monitors, the unlocked project logo on one screen, code running on another, when Riley called. "Detective Kramer has finalized the referral," he said. "Federal prosecutors are ready to pursue charges. Wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, Bankfraud. They want to indict Mark and Diane Aldridge." I closed my eyes and leaned back. This was more than restitution. This was accountability that would follow them for life. Outside, the city buzzed with renewal. Cherry blossoms lined the sidewalks. Joggers waved as I passed. Small businesses reopened their patios. Life moved on. That evening, I drafted the final affidavit for the Unlocked Project's latest case, a college freshman whose guardian had siphoned her scholarship checks. I described the patterned fraudulent signatures, fake invoices, unauthorized transfers, drawing directly from the blueprint I'd endured. Each line of my narrative carried the weight of my own story, transforming personal pain into collective empowerment. Late at night, I found myself on the balcony again, looking down at the lobby where Dad's old work van had once sputtered to a halt. I imagined him pleading for rides to job sites, Mom signing up for community volunteer shifts to keep busy. Their choices had forced them into penance. But I didn't feel glee. I felt relief. Release. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office. It was concise grand jury indictment forthcoming. Aaron meant date set for late May. I forwarded it to Marlo, who replied simply, "We'll be there." On the day of the indictment, snowflakes fell unexpectedly, late spring flurries that melted the moment they landed. I arrived at the federal courthouse in my suit, briefcase in hand, a USB drive of final evidence in my pocket. Riley and Grandpa joined me. A 3-generation line of quiet resolve. Inside, the clerk called my name. I stepped forward, handed over the letter, and watched as the case number appeared on the docket: United States v. Mark Aldridge, Diane Aldridge. It felt surreal, seeing my parents' names under the seal of the federal government. Outside the courthouse doors, the world waited, a few reporters with cameras, neighbors who recognized me from the building lobby. They whispered questions I didn't answer. Instead, I looked at Grandpa. He nodded. Then Riley. He gave me a thumbs up. We walked away without a backward glance. Back home, I unlocked the front door, and the apartment welcomed me with its familiar silence, the silence of justice served. I sat at the dining table, spread out the indictment papers, but left them untouched. Some battles don't require immediate response. They require time and trust in the system you helped build. That night, my phone lit up with a new text from Amelia. "I'm proud of you. Thank you for everything." It wasn't an apology for her parents, but it was enough to show that our bond could survive the fallout. I typed back, "Always here for you." We never spoke about Christmas Eve, about the lobby, about the question that sealed everything. But we didn't need to. The shared weight of those documents under my door said more than words ever could. Over the next months, I continued my work coding, consulting, and supporting more Unlocked Project clients. Each success story reminded me that a single question, asked at the right moment, can dismantle a lie and rebuild a life. And each time I crossed the threshold of my apartment, closed the door, and set down my keys, I felt the quiet power of reclaiming what was always mine. Summer sun glinted off the river as I walked the trail, where my childhood dog once chased squirrels. Each step felt purposeful, no longer burdened by hesitation, but propelled by a quiet certainty. The Unlocked Project office would open at 9, and I had a stack of new cases to review, people whose own parents or guardians had betrayed them in ways that mirrored my story. Back at the apartment, I organized my workspace. The original birth certificate Amelia returned lay in a small frame on my desk, A reminder of identity reclaimed. Nearby, the federal indictment against Mark and Diane Aldridge waited in its envelope, unopened. Some battled them impatience. Mid-afternoon, a package arrived, fresh business cards for the Unlocked project. Each one embossed with our logo and tagline, "Your future is not forfeit." I handed a stack to Riley, who smiled knowingly. "Ready for the next ones," he said, clicking through emails from new clients. That evening, the doorbell chimed. It was Detective Kramer. Stopping by before heading home, he carried a manila folder. The federal case file. "Thought you'd want the copy," he said. "It's everything you already know, plus a few surprises on asset movements your parents tried to hide offshore. We're tracking it now." I thanked him, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The system was working. My evidence had become a foundation for federal prosecution. Ensuring that justice extended beyond restitution, personal life continued to bloom. I invited Amelia to dinner one Thursday, homemade pasta and a salad from the farmer's market. She arrived early, eyes bright but wary. We didn't discuss our parents. Instead, we talked about her new job in Portland, the nonprofit helping homeless veterans. I realized that her path, too, had been reshaped by our shared ordeal. Later that night, I sat on the balcony, city lights dancing below. I thought of Marcus, a teenager whose aunt siphoned his college savings, whom I was meeting tomorrow. I thought of every person who had felt powerless against the ones they trusted most. And I thought of the question that launched this entire journey. Is the apartment comfortable? It was more than a question. It was a challenge, a catalyst, a call to reclaim what's rightfully yours. I closed my eyes and took a breath of warm evening air. This apartment, this life, was exactly that, mine. One Thursday evening, as I wrapped up work in my home office, the lobby intercom buzzed. I frowned, pausing mid-keystroke. My parents, Mark and Diane Aldridge, were downstairs, requesting entry. I glanced at Riley, who offered a slight nod. They'd arrived. I stepped into the elevator, pressing the lobby button. The doors slid open to reveal them standing by the front desk. Dad in his worn work boots and faded jeans, Mom clutching her purse like a lifeline. Their faces were drawn, eyes rimmed with red. It had been months since I'd seen them. And yet there they were, small and vulnerable beneath the bright lobby lights. Mom's voice trembled. "Nick, please." Dad swallowed hard. "We just want to talk." I said nothing. I walked past them, the elevator doors humming closed behind me. Their voices faded on the polished marble floor. My heart pounded, but my expression stayed calm, unchanged. Inside the car, I pressed 32. The floors counted up, each ding echoing the distance growing between us. They had stolen my future, but they thought a few words could repair it. They did not deserve my anger. They deserved my resolve. The doors opened, and I stepped out into the quiet hallway. Moments later, I heard Dad's footsteps in the elevator behind me. The doors clicked shut again, leaving their questions unanswered. Back in my apartment, I set down my keys and exhaled. My living room looked the same, floor-to-ceiling windows, the cityscape sparkling below. The apartment that had been built for me with their betrayal. I poured a glass of water and stood by the balcony, looking out at the lights reflected on the river. My phone buzzed with a message from Grandpa. They called asking if you were okay. I told them it's not my place to answer. I smiled at his dry humor. He understood boundaries. I walked over to the console table, where I kept my framed birth certificate. I touched the glass gently, thinking of Amelia's silent gift. For all their attempts to rewrite my past, she had reminded me where I came from and who I would become. A second buzz drew my attention, a text from Amelia. They came to the building tonight. "How are you?" I typed back. "I'm safe. I'm home." Silence fell as I stood on the balcony, the hum of traffic below soft and distant. They thought they could reclaim a place in my life with one conversation. But I had already reclaimed my future through every affidavit filed, every subpoena served, every rest upon court orders. My peace was not negotiable. Later that night, Riley stopped by with the next case file, an elderly couple whose nephew had forged their signatures on a reverse mortgage. He handed me a stack of documents and said, "Ready when you are." I nodded, feeling the weight of another person's pain and hope. I spread the papers across my dining table. Each new story reminded me why I had chosen this path. Not for revenge alone, but for restoration of justice, of dignity, of lives derailed by those once trusted. As the clock edged toward midnight, I closed the case file and packed away my laptop. I paused in the hallway, looking back at the closed elevator doors. They remained shut. A barrier I had sate long ago. I turned off the lights and walked to the bedroom. The sheets were still as crisp as the day I discovered them. I lay down, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night's events. No shouting, no confrontation, just a quiet assertion of boundaries and the knowledge that some doors, once closed, should remain that way. In the darkness, I whispered to myself, "You are not what they stole. You are everything you choose to become." And with that, I finally slept. A week later, the federal indictment was unsealed. United States of America versus Mark Aldridge and Diane Aldridge. Their names printed on official court documents. An indelible stain of criminal charges they could not erase. I found the notice taped to my front door delivered by a bailiff in the early morning chill, and I did not rejoice. Instead, I folded it carefully and placed it in my legal file. A reminder that justice is not spectacle, but due process. That afternoon, I walked into Riley's makeshift office in my living room. Sunlight slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the rows of case files stacked on his desk. "They'll be arraigned next week," he said, closing the folder. "Federal court in St. Paul. You'll testify as the victim." I nodded, feeling the familiar hum of determination. "I'll tell the truth," I said softly, "and I'll answer every question with facts, not feelings." Riley offered a rare smile. Quiet revenge. "Right, let the evidence do the talking." His words echoed a promise I had made to myself months ago. No outbursts. No tears on the stand. Only unwavering resolve. We spent the rest of the afternoon preparing my testimony. Dates, amounts, account numbers, specific transactions. I practiced until saying $673,000 felt as natural as good morning. That evening, I returned to the riverfront trail, my running shoes pounding the pavement in steady rhythm. The breeze off the Mississippi carried memories of a simpler childhood: dog parks, lemonade stands. The first time I rode my bike down the hill without training wheels, I realized that the battle for my future had begun long before the trust fund matured. It began with every lesson I learned about trust, loyalty, and self-worth. On the morning of the arraignment, I wore a charcoal suit, white shirt, and a simple tie, the attire of someone who intended to be taken seriously. Grandpa offered a word of advice as we waited in the hallway. "Speak clearly, stand tall, and remember why you're here." His quiet confidence bolstered my own. Inside the courtroom, the judge called the case. My parents stood at the defense table, Mark in a rumpled suit, Diane with tears she did not wipe away. They avoided each other's gaze. I stood by Riley, hand on the witness podium, and recited my name and address as required. The prosecutor outlined the charges: wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, bank fraud, the full spectrum of financial betrayal. When it was my turn, I spoke in a firm voice that carried beyond my own ear. I did not authorize any early withdrawals. I was not aware of the trust until my birthday party 3 days ago. My name was forged 36 times, and $640,000 was taken without my knowledge. I paused, letting each sentence settle like stones in a pond. The defense attorney attempted to frame it as misunderstanding. "Is it possible you misremembered any of these transactions?" she asked in a syrupy tone. I looked directly at her. "My memory is supported by bank logs, email chains, and phone records. I remember them because I reviewed every single piece of evidence." That exchange felt final, a closing of the circle they had tried to exploit. After my testimony, I sat with Riley and Grandpa, watching as the court recorded every word, every exhibit, every fact. Outside, Reporters asked for statements. I declined. I did not want headlines. I wanted resolution. Over the following weeks, I continued my usual routine contract work by day, unlocked project sessions by night. Each case I took on reminded me that this was never just about me. It was about standing up for anyone whose trust had been betrayed. It was about proving that silence does not equal weakness. Then came the final hearing. The judge reviewed the record and pronounced a sentence for my parents. Restitution of $673,000 plus supervised probation and community service. Federal charges remained pending, but the judge made it clear that further cooperation could mitigate the outcomes. Mark and Diane Aldridge would spend the next several years under court supervision, a living reminder of the consequences of greed. When the verdict was read, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I did not cheer. I did not gloat. Instead, I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, as if exhaling the last of the betrayal that had haunted me. That evening, I met Amelia on the apartment balcony. She brought 2 mugs of hot chocolate, my usual preference when temperatures dipped. We stood side by side, looking out at the city lights. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. Handing me a mug, I smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you." She nodded, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup. "I just wanted you to know who you were." Before everything else, we sipped in silence. The city's hum below us. The building's height made us feel suspended between past and future, between the lives we had lost and the ones we were building. I placed a hand on the railing and spoke into the night. "Your future is not forfeit." And in that moment, I knew it was true. Months have passed since the final verdict. Yet every morning I wake with the same quiet affirmation, "This life is mine." The apartment no longer feels like a crime scene, but a sanctuary floor-to-ceiling windows framing a city that witnessed my reclamation. I slide into my routine coffee brewed at home. A brief check of new unlocked project inquiries, and then settling at my desk to code or counsel. One afternoon, Grandpa Edward surprised me with a visit. He carried 2 cups of dark roast and wore his customary calm expression. We sat in the living room, sunlight filtering through the blinds, dust particles dancing in its glow. "You've done well," he said softly. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone you've helped." I looked at him, memories of that night at the dining table flashing in my mind. "I couldn't have without you and Riley." He nodded. Sometimes the quietest acts of justice are the loudest statements of character. I took a sip of coffee and thought about every person I'd guided through identity theft affidavits. Every veteran and student who had reclaimed what was stolen. Each case was a ripple, extending the reach of that one question. "Is the apartment comfortable?" Later that week, a feature story appeared in a national legal magazine profiling the Unlocked project. They interviewed me about the mission, the cases, and what drove me to turn personal betrayal into a public service. I read the article from cover to cover, feeling a blend of pride and solemn responsibility. The world now knew my story. But it was not a tale of revenge. It was a testament to resilience. That Saturday, Amelia flew in for a visit. We met at the farmer's market, exchanging creative mockery over overpriced pastries and artisanal cheeses. No mention of the trials or courtrooms, just sisterly banter. We wandered stalls, laughing at the outrageous price of 4 avocados and sampling honey straight from the jar. As the sun dipped low, we returned to the apartment. On the balcony, I poured us each a glass of cold lemonade. The city lights blinked on one by one, mirroring the stars above. "It's beautiful," she said. I smiled. "It's home." She nodded, gaze steady. "I've been thinking about what comes next." I set my glass down. "The next chapter." "Yeah," she said. "I want to join Unlocked Project. Use my background in social work to help clients heal emotionally." My heart swelled. I'd be honored. In that moment, the story came full circle. Betrayal had fractured our family, but shared purpose was forging a new bond. Grandma's old home, once a stage for deception, now lived on in memory, while a new legacy took shape here. As Amelia packed to leave, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. I held her for a beat longer. Thank you for reminding me who I was. She smiled and disappeared into the elevator. I stood alone on the balcony, inhaling the evening air. Below, the quiet symphony of urban life continued conversations, drifting up from street level, distanciant, the hum of traffic across the river. I closed my eyes and reflected on the journey. From that fateful birthday question to courtrooms, from stolen funds to federal indictments, from isolation to the creation of a movement that now helps countless others, each step was guided by a simple principle: protect your future with calm determination. Turning back inside, I passed the framed birth certificate on the console table, proof that identity, once reclaimed, is unbreakable. I flicked off the living room light and headed to the bedroom, anticipation stirring for the next day's work. Before I slipped under the sheets, I whispered into the darkness. Not as a question, but as a declaration. The apartment is comfortable, and with that truth anchored in my heart, I finally slept at peace, purposeful, and home.